Good morning. It's Dr. Antonio again with Live Talk on Monday morning, coming at you from Still Point Ayurveda in Philadelphia. And today we'll be discussing part two of food. Let's talk about food. So last week we talked briefly about how important it is to understand food, and that in general there's a difference between Western culinary practices and Eastern, especially Ayurvedic culinary practices and cooking practices, because the Western system generally focuses on the palate, the taste, getting it into the mouth and what that actually feels like in the mouth. And because there's a lot of nerve sensation in the cranial area, the mouth has a lot of taste buds. These taste buds detect certain things, certain flavors, sweet, salty, sour, bitter, pungent, and astringent, according to Ayurveda. And so these tastes are predominantly favored in the West by the Western culinary science itself. So they like to cook with, foods that are more savory. That tends to be the food paradigm that's followed, is the savory combination, which is a combination of salty and sweet. But in other cultures outside of the Western culture, it's understood that different spices play different roles and are important for how the meal is actually properly digested. So it's not just about what the food tastes like or how pretty it looks. It's about what it does when it gets past the mouth into the digestive system. And Ayurvedic pharmacology assesses food also, because it understands that those herbs that you have in the cupboard in your cabinet, that salt and pepper and that basil and oregano, it's not just about the flavors and how it makes food taste good, but it's understanding that each of those spices in the cabinet actually has a medicinal quality to it. So of course, the better the quality of the herb, the better the quality of the medicine the herb can provide. Some companies, in your local supermarket that sell those random, like salt and pepper and paprika and things like that. You want to know, like, what is the quality of that? Researching the company, understanding the company's basis, how it's harvested, how it's cultivated, how it's brought to you into that little jar or container. Those are important components, because the processing of the herbs, which are the spices in your cabinet, are very important as well, because that's going to determine, there's a difference between dried rosemary that's been just quickly harvested and thrown into a container and brought to your supermarket for $1.99 versus that really higher quality rosemary that's been harvested properly with cultivating the soil and the atmosphere for it. The potency is going to be very different. And so in some cases you need less of that herb or spice because it's more potent and it actually does more of what it needs to do. So it's important to understand that the cabinet which houses the spices is more than just a cabinet that houses spices. I remember a very long time ago, at the beginning of my adventures into holistic medicine and holistic practices, the teacher said to us on the first day of class, you can tell the quality of a person's health by what their cabinets look like. And so at that point, I looked at my cabinet in my mind as she was talking about this, because I'm just that instantaneous, especially when something speaks out very powerfully to my heart. I said to myself, self, what do I have in my cabinet, as she's talking about the quality of my cabinet? And I remember, I was post-undergrad and just starting out on my own, in my own apartment, and I was in a very minimal budget, and I went to the dollar store and bought some of the herbs and spices there, and I was buying some food from their refrigerators. And, when she was talking about this and knowing that the direction of where I was heading with this process of holistic medicine, there had to be a shift. And so I immediately after class, and in New York City, Whole Foods was open till I think 11 o'clock at that time. I ran to the supermarket, Whole Foods, and I spent, a few $100s, which was at that point pushing very past my budget. But I realized, wow, like my health is really worth the investment, and I would rather not cut costs when it comes to what my physical, mental health well-being consists of. So if I have to spend a little bit more on better quality so that I have a better body, better mind, better agility and flexibility and clarity and all these things, then it's worth the investment. So, you know, I trekked from Whole Foods with these 2 bags, brown paper bags, on the train for about an hour. And I went to my cabinet at home and I took everything that was in the cabinet, removed it, replaced it with what I bought from Whole Foods, which didn't completely fill the cabinets because anyway, if you know about shopping at Whole Foods, it's a little bit expensive, or any Whole Foods place. It's a little bit more costly, but eventually you get into a momentum with it. And so the food that I took out of the cabinet, so I didn't just throw it away, I donated because someone else could benefit from it, because it's better to have some food than no food. And similarly, in Ayurveda, we understand it's better to eat, even if it's the thing that's not organic in that moment when you're properly hungry, than not eat at all. That's more inappropriate to skip a meal when you're actually hungry than it is to worry about, like, where am I getting my food from? Because the body's going to need the food no matter what, and it's going to know how to process things accordingly when it's set up right. And in that instance, you cause more catastrophe when you don't eat. So, thinking long-term damage and benefits, this is what we consider. So, considering the spice cabinet in your house is a medicine cabinet. So whenever I'm cooking, I'm very clear about which spices I'm going to use. Not just about spices, but not just about taste, but what's the meal that I'm cooking? How am I using these herbs in this meal? Are they supportive of the meal? Are they antagonistic to the meal? Are they going to support my digestive system? I also factor in, what's the weather like? Because I cook 90% of the time according to the weather. And so, for instance, on a cold, droopy day, I'm going to probably make a soup, and it's going to probably have some turmeric or some oregano and some garlic or onions or something that's going to lighten it up and also create a little bit of heat to circulate my digestive system. On a really hot, hot day, I'm not going to be using those spices. I'll be using more cooling spices, like coriander or just the salt and pepper. Like, a little bit goes a long way. The thing is, we have to understand that when we're combining herbs, spices together, that less is better. You don't have to put 30 different types of ingredients together to make a dish. It actually doesn't need to be that complicated. The body doesn't like complication. It's really simple. It just says, feed me. It's more about the mind and the senses that really dictate, I need to feel amazing every time I eat this, and this has to taste this way, this way, this way, this way. There is a thing as excess. So in the American culture, in Western culture, when we're applying Ayurvedic principles, we factor in what is more common in this culture. And we know the U.S. is a melting pot of different cultures. So we have to understand what is your cultural background. Being born in the United States, you could be a whole mixture of different cultures. Some people call it a mutt. And you're living in the U.S., so you start with what's basic, which is you're living in the U.S. What are the spices common here? So we have salt and pepper. Very simple. Those are the primary condiments you see anywhere you go into any food place: salt and pepper and butter, and some packets of honey. So these condiments at these random places, restaurants and takeout, and all these fast food places or fast beverage places. It's not coincidental. They don't have a whole arsenal of, here's the coriander section, here's the oregano section, here's the turmeric section. It's salt and pepper, because salt and pepper can go a long way and have very powerful, amazing properties in cooking. It doesn't have to be that complicated. We can make it fancier and add accents of lavender to certain things that we're cooking, or accents of fennel. That's all great, because if you're understanding cooking, then you know when to cook with what herb or spice. If you're just doing it according to palate, then you don't know what's going to happen when it gets into your digestive system and how the body processes all that information. So, tidbits as far as cooking, this is what we consider. It's like, what does the kitchen cabinet look like? What are the spices? Do you know what they do? If you have all these spices there, what do they do? Do you understand them? You could start with a Google search and say, benefits of black pepper, benefits of turmeric, benefits of coriander and fennel and mustard seeds. And, I have over 50 different spices, and then another 10 or so spice combinations in packets, like Mexican taco spice or curry, which isn't actually, it's a mixture. There was no actual spice per se. There's a curry leaf, but anyway, that's a whole other conversation. And so understanding what's in my kitchen cabinet. Is it the medicine? You know, do I have the pharmacy in my kitchen cabinet? Do I have all, these all these medications or like these over-the-counter things from Pepto-Bismol to, Robitussin and things like that? What's the quality of those? And those probably should be redirected to some other cabinet by the bathroom or something like that, not necessarily in the kitchen, or have a small section of it, so that the kitchen itself is the sanctuary. It's the herbiary. It's the place where you're creating this opportunity to support your health by cooking and eating healthy and properly. So looking at something as cooking itself, it's important, according to Ayurvedic principles, to understand what is the season. The same meal that I'll make in the middle of winter, I will not be making in the middle of summer or in the middle of spring, because the food, if you're eating locally and if you're eating seasonally, will change and rotate throughout the year. There might be some things that are constant throughout the year. If you have a cold, whether it's winter, spring, summer, or fall, you'll have some soup, some kind of soup, some cultural-based soup that's supportive for your health. So those are things that are universal or neutral. But other things like pumpkin pies and apple pies and, butternut squashes, like it's really important to look at your state and get a general grid or general template of what is harvested during what season, because then you'll more or less know what to eat during that season. If you live near a co-op or some sort of natural food store that is more local based, they'll more likely have foods that are grown locally. So what you don't see is because it's not there during that season. And if you don't think that, something like mangoes will ever be seen there, if that's the case, then you'll see that it's imported, because obviously on the East Coast, especially in New England section, you're not going to have mango trees. Florida, sure, those tropical climates, yes. So those are imported, and there's a time and place to eat mango. And have you noticed mango? Have you noticed when you have that mango that's imported from Florida or California or Hawaii or Mexico or South America, and when you eat it in different seasons, that the taste is different? It's not just about the transport, but the fruit itself knows the season, and it's going to produce its own optimal essence in the season that it's appropriate for. Yes, it's not coincidental. And the body, it changes with the season. So not even just that we're, like a dog. Dog sheds their skin, their coat. If they have a thick coat, like my dog, she sheds a lot as it gets warmer out, as the season goes from spring to summer. And then as summer progresses and starts to get closer to cooler weather, then she starts to lose the coat less. Humans do that in a certain way, in a similar way, but we also do it on a digestive level. The microbes that line the digestive tract from mouth to rectum start to shape itself and change according to the season. So that means it's getting ready for the potential to process the foods that are available that season. So there was a study done several years ago that I read about, that they examined deer that would eat during the seasons that were appropriate. They're scraping bark and eating, sprouts in the spring and full fruits and flowers in the summer. And they force-fed deer foods that were out of the season. And so it was reported that they died because their digestive system was not handling properly. Now, we can't say per se that would be something scientifically applied to humans in the same sense. We wouldn't die per se, but it's something to consider, because, and requires further examination to understand, well, if my body is changing with the seasons, if I understand when it's getting lighter earlier and darker earlier, and it gets colder at certain times of year, and my body's thickening up itself and increasing blood flow to the digestive system for winter versus summer, then it would make sense that processing foods that are more local and processed during that time of year will be easier and appropriate. And then Ayurveda adds in the element of not just about seasonal cooking, but what is your constitutional makeup? What is your own physiology? Because, we have the three doshas in Ayurveda, which encompass Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And, three different types in general have their own sense of digestive capacity. And so it has to be catered to that. So not just eating seasonally, but is it constitutionally correct? What is the digestive capacity in this present moment? Because that's going to be important to understand what gets digested, what gets broken down, what doesn't, where does it get transferred to and transformed into or not, and then where does it end up if it's not being processed properly and people are getting colds and things like that. So we have to look at a lot of different factors, a lot of different components. It's not just easy enough to say, I'm going to be vegetarian. It's about understanding what your own digestive capacity is, what your constitutional makeup is, what your culture is made of, and all of this is going to influence your health outcome inevitably, short term and long term. So eating with foods that are in the season and per your constitution and where you're at in the present moment with your digestive capacity and health capacity, this is all going to dictate what the investment is in the future, because what you're doing today is investing in tomorrow. Each season that you're engaging in with foods is contributing towards the next season. It takes several weeks to process all the food. It's the essence eventually that turns into the body's microcellular structures, the essence of the macro foods. So the foods are large in volume and texture and context, and you're breaking it down. So you're going from the macro to the micro as it goes through the digestive system. And so understanding that what I'm doing today is going to affect me tomorrow. So just because you start eating healthy today doesn't mean you don't have to pay for what you did for the past several weeks, several months, several years. It really is cumulative. And the body is a historical system. And so each season prepares you for the next. And it's great that we actually are talking about this topic today, because we're coming into September, and this is the phase of the year when we're transitioning from one season to the other. And all along, as we're going into Vata season, which is the next season, especially in places that have cooler climates, but in general, this geography, we are experiencing sort of like these beginning signs over the couple weeks of August. And we're coming into September and October, so the peak is slowly increasing as the season is winding down. And so we're in this little bit of a window in that part of the bell curve. And so it's important because it's during the transitions that Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine especially say that people get ill in, because people are not knowing how to transition. One day is 90, next day is 60, one day is 80, next day is 70. It's cold and rainy one day, it's hot and dry another day. And these are all components that we have to stay on top of per day. And again, it's what's your digestive capacity feel like today? What's your constitutional makeup? What is the current weather of today as we're transitioning? How are you treating that day according with the food? Food will be the medicine, or it can be the poison. It doesn't matter what food it is. It doesn't matter what diet it is. If you know how to use it properly and apply it in a scientific way, then of course you're going to have health issues. And this is what I do, and this is how I work with people. And it's amazing because I love talking about food, and that's the first thing we start with. And first step at the consultation is talking about what the food consists of, the ins and out of what they're doing right now and in general and historically. And we shift throughout the year. And so especially when you're working with an Ayurvedic doctor or an Ayurvedic professional, we get to have a bigger picture and a smaller picture, and we rotate with you throughout the year to make sure you make the transitions properly and to make sure that things are going smoothly. And how do we know? How do we measure this? We measure this based on your health outcome. And how do we determine things? Based on what your current health outcome is, based on your own historical investment. It's amazing. This is a really amazing topic. Next week, I'll be talking more about food. And, if you're interested in working with me, because here I am, available, and I'm always accepting new patients, and I love working with people, and I love people's adventures and journeys into this, and learning about their story and how they are, who they are, and where they are, and so we can work together and move forward in a really healthy way. I'll provide my link to my website, and also I do a yoga class twice a week. Normally Tuesdays and Fridays. This week is going to be Tuesday and Thursday because it's a holiday weekend. And I would love to see you there. Just come on in and, join the Zoom class or do a Zoom consultation with me, or come on in for a live in-person session where everything's safely done according to COVID protocols. And just support yourself. You're totally worth it. And I support you. And I love when people thrive in their health. And in thriving in your health, you'll feel happy and joyful. You don't have to feel unhealthy. You don't have to feel tired all the time. You don't have to have hormones all over the place. You don't have to feel constipated or have that robust belly because you're just accumulating this visceral fat that's causing congestion in your organs and eventually going to lead to either potential cardiovascular diseases or, all these kinds of things. I want you to thrive, and I know you can. Take some time, take some discipline, take some commitment, but you're really doing this for yourself, long term and short term. So I look forward to hearing from you, and until next week, as a side note, possibly I won't be doing a live talk next Monday because it is Labor Day, and depending on where I'm at, I may do this anyway, or possibly Tuesday. But stay tuned, and I look forward to hearing from you. Have an amazing day and rest of your week.